Welcome back, builders. In today's video we're going to be taking our motorized Stingray on a bit of a cruise. Having built this bike just for fun, with practicality being an afterthought, finding good road conditions to ride it on was a little more challenging than I anticipated. I'm pretty familiar with all roads that lead in and out of my small town, so while scouring Google Earth in an attempt to find something that maybe I missed, I noticed something interesting. There are a lot of marked and unmarked cemeteries on Google Earth. Some of them I found purely by accident while out on rides that are not on the maps, and many others which are clearly marked and easy to find. And from what I can count, looks like there's about 100 within biking distance. Of course, that's not even including the ones which are hidden. From time to time, I've stopped at some of these and had a bit of a sobering feeling while walking through them and looking at the dates and names. I remember thinking to myself that it would make an interesting series to try and visit as many of these as I can, and that was back before I knew just how many there were. When I go on long rides, it's nice to have a destination in mind, even if that's not the goal of the ride itself. So I'm going to create a playlist where videos will pop into it from time to time as I visit more and more of these cemeteries. The reason why I'm starting this with the Stingray is because there are a handful of these relatively close to our starting point that we can check off the list without pushing the bike past its limits. And because many of these require a much more capable machine, it'll allow us to save those ones for the builds with much more integrity. And because I enjoy making adventure-style videos more than anything else, I hope you guys enjoy this as well. With Wynn Parish being established in 1852, many of the headstones in these local cemeteries will reflect this date, around the mid-1800s, as the oldest we'll find. And I'm not a history buff, and I'm not sure what to expect as we push out further and further into the wilderness, finding older and older cemeteries, but at the very least I'm hoping to find some headstones from the early 1800s, because Louisiana was founded in 1812. Obviously, history goes back further than when it was founded, and it might even be possible to find some from the late 1700s. I'm not holding my breath, but if we do, that'll be amazing. But still, even if we don't, I won't be disappointed simply because could you imagine what it was like to live in the mid-1800s? So let's go ahead and start with our local community cemetery. Edward Richwood Cooper, August 16th, 1882, November 9th, 1913. Fraser's a name with some influence around here. They own a very large lumber mill, so I wonder if this is the same family name. Is that the Mason symbol? I don't remember. 1882 to 1925. William Walker Braggs? William Walker Braggs. Can't quite make out the name on this one. 1862 to 1918. This is a community cemetery. I don't think it's very old. The late 1800s appears to be the oldest dates I'm seeing. Which, let that sink in for a moment. Think about what the world was like when these people were born. That's well over 100 years ago, man. How much everything's changed compared to what they saw in their last days. It's crazy to think about. Let's look at one more, see if we can find an older date. We got an interesting one over here. 1865 to 1906. Oh, interesting. Look at this. A tree grew through the tombstone. (1905 to 1907). Our next destination takes us to the Morningstar Cemetery 1.5 miles away, where we'll have to briefly traverse a shoulderless highway that can be busy from time to time. So this was a bit sketchy. I wasn't able to find any additional information about this cemetery other than its name. The dates on most of the headstones appear to be from the early 1900s, and I think I did see a few late 1800s. So we can assume this one's a little bit younger. I used to take the dual sport down here from time to time during the later parts of the year when this has all died down. There's a nice little trail that goes back here. It's pretty rough, and there's a lot of sections that are real marshy. It could just barely get through it. Never tried to take a gas bike down it. The TAF might be able to do it because I don't remember seeing any red mud. It's definitely got the power. The fat tire bikes are what I'm going to try later this year when this dies down, because I think they will have an easier time doing it than the dual sport, to be honest, because they're lighter and they got those fatties. Anyways, there's a micro geocache right here. Any of you guys know what geocaching is, you'll know what this is. This is a pretty small cemetery. It's on this little hill. Got these old oaks. 2020. Not a lot of old ones in here. This is a pretty young cemetery, I guess. Just thought that was an interesting date to be born on. 1900 to 1969. Another 1900 to 1984. 1913 to 1971. Yeah, about the oldest I've been able to find, again, late 1800s, is 1888 to 1941. Right, there might be one more we can visit today. It's going to be a bit of a hike for the bike, especially this bike. That's 3.4 miles, which normally would be fine, but that's 3.4 miles of terrible road to ride this thing on. It is so hot today, guys. I am done with summer. I was ready for winter the first day of summer. As we push this little Geocache motor through some blistering temperatures with no ride on standby and no tools on my back, this is where I really start to second guess what I'm doing. But we're committed, so we'll push on and just deal with whatever happens. Our next stop is the Teagle Cemetery. Like many of the cemeteries you'll see throughout this series, no additional information that I could find. Some of these will have dates for their establishment, but most of them won't. I'd also like to point out that most of these small cemeteries used to have a small church house next to them, but the buildings are long since gone. So while we're heading on out to the next destination, I'll give you a little bit of an update on the bike because I know some of you are just here for that. We did change out the rear tire. We're using a thinner one. It's just a BMX tire we got from Walmart, so the chain doesn't rub anymore. However, that rubbing sound that I was hearing in our first trip is still there, so I guess that half link is giving me grief after all. I'm just going to run it. It'll either carve itself a path or something will break. So far it's still working. I also decided to go ahead and change out to a thumb throttle so that I could keep the stock grips on both ends of the handlebar. It just looks better this way. I did sacrifice the kill switch in this situation, so I just used the clutch to turn off the motor. If I end up keeping this bike, I'll add an aftermarket kill switch, but for now, this is fine. A few of you pointed out in our first video about this bike that the rear seat post can be a compromised part of the bike, causing injury if it breaks, which may be common, especially with a full-grown adult riding this tiny little bike. I have heeded your warnings, and anytime I see a bump coming up, I try to put more pressure on my legs than on the seat. So this is the Bolton Teagle. Probably said that wrong. Look, there's a little tiny baby lizard. Where you going, little buddy? As expected, that seat, not the best for bumpy roads. I feel like it would be okay for long, smooth rides. From what I've noticed so far visiting these old graveyards, it's usually when there is no church, you'll find some old graves because the building's long gone. We have some mid-1800s here. Milam, M-I-L-A-M for the last name. Milam, born July 12th, 1862. Died December 4th, 1904. Actually, this one's kind of unique, a little bit tragic. Her infant son, I think that's 1887. So all those years later, and she was still buried next to her infant, unless they had the graves moved. Same last name. 1904, December 13th. That's the same year and it's only about a week apart. Wonder what the story behind that is. This is going to be both one of the challenges and nice little treasure hunts about this series. There's another cemetery, and I missed it earlier because it is close to a church, not appearing to be on the same property. I was looking at this church and I didn't see a graveyard, so I was about to skip it until I noticed this little clearing here. There is its graveyard. Traffic has been really light since I've been here. This will be the third car I've seen, so I think we can do it. We'll do one more. Our last destination for today will take us to the Union Hill Baptist Church, which has a cemetery tucked away behind a small grove of trees that I never noticed before. I pass by this church all the time when going on my little adventures, but without checking the satellite view, probably never would have found this. As personally, I always just assumed it was somebody's driveway. Louisiana is unique sometimes. Their driveways for personal property can actually look like street signs. It's very confusing. When you couple that with the fact that private property is not required to have a posted sign, you can easily stumble upon somebody's property without even realizing it. It's up to the traveler to know whether they're supposed to be there, which honestly makes sense, but with some of the people that live out in these woods, you're liable to go missing and be never heard from again if you make a wrong turn. I know that might sound paranoid, but it's a real thing, and it does happen. Just one look at the satellite view of Louisiana, and you realize exactly how deep these woods go and how easy it would be to disappear. Don't get me wrong, you're just as likely to run into a friendly face who will help you out. I have a personal experience when I first started riding motorized bikes. I got a little turned around and lost on some back roads trying to find my dad's house without taking the main highway. I ended up stumbling upon a hunting lease and just trying to get through it when I ran into an individual on a side-by-side with his hunting dog and rifle in hand. Expecting the worst, but he was actually pretty friendly and quite surprised to see this little motorized bike putt-putting through the woods. He gave me directions and we both went on our way. But that's about the best case scenario you can hope for. I wouldn't expect it all the time. There's someone else here. I don't want to disturb them. I'll just look at a couple dates real quick and then we'll head out. Out of respect and to be courteous, I realize there's a time and place to talk about the bike, but I did find it interesting that even at a cemetery, the little Stingray gets noticed. Hey! Yeah!
Hey, you made that bike?
Yeah.
Hey, what you got on there?
It's a little kit 2-stroke motor.
Oh, okay. I seen him driving somewhere too. I was like, I know that dude because I seen that bike.
Yeah, I ride them all over Winnfield.
Oh yeah, that's all right. I like that.
Thanks. No way. I found him. It's Amos. Oh, you poor, poor soul. Yeah, no real old ones in this cemetery, but the church this next to doesn't look that old either. It looks like it was rebuilt. I'm assuming the original church was probably right around here and they built the new one across the road. Yeah. 1876 to 1957. And put this into perspective. I was born in 1986. And the world back then, from my earliest memories, which would be the 1990s, was so different. Like everything was so different compared to what it is now. And that's about 30 years. Imagine what over 100 years is to somebody. Jeez. Such a sobering thought, man. All right, we are running out of light. We got a beautiful sunset though, but I have no lights on this bike. I do have a reflective bright orange shirt on, so that should do us good to get home, but that's 4 cemeteries down. So this was our first restless visit. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if it's something you'd like to see more often. This little Stingray was only supposed to do a 12-mile round trip as we had planned for 3 visits. The hidden cemetery pushed it to 16 miles in total. Surprisingly, it handled it with no perceivable issues. But this isn't something I could see myself doing very often on this bike. Whereas it's not a long distance for most of my bikes, it's considerable for this tiny little frame. And with that being said, I'm not sure that I'm going to keep this bike for very long. I'll probably ride it around, take it to work a few times and have my fun, but it's just not practical for my roads. But I know this was a build that a lot of you would get a kick out of and enjoy seeing, and for some of you it might be a practical ride in your situations. So for what it's worth, hopefully some of you got some value seeing it being able to carry a full-grown adult around for 16 miles. Anyways, I hope you guys got some useful, well, No, this was just for entertainment. I hope you guys were mildly entertained in today's video. And until next time, ride safe.